You have no idea who you're dealing with." The words hung in the air, sharp and cold, as the morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Birmingham District Courthouse, casting long, patterned shadows across the polished wooden floor. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual hum, but inside, a thick tension had settled over the room like a heavy blanket, the kind that made every shuffle of papers, every creak of a bench, and every whispered word feel amplified. Malik Jefferson sat quietly near the front row, his back straight, shoulders squared, and hands resting calmly on the legal folder in his lap. The soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead combined with the occasional distant echo of footsteps created a rhythm that seemed to pulse with anticipation. He was dressed in a simple dark suit, charcoal gray, perfectly pressed, shoes polished to a reflective shine, blending seamlessly into the decorum of the courtroom while exuding an understated authority that few could ignore. His eyes, a deep brown, scanned the room with precision, noting the subtle movements of the bailiffs, the shifting weight of jurors, and the slight tilt of the officer's badge as it caught the light. Officer Rick Thompson, a man with a broad chest and a stern jawline, strode across the floor with the confidence of someone used to command, his white uniform crisp, his polished shoes clicking against the wooden floor in a steady cadence. He moved as though the courtroom were his stage, glancing at the spectators with a mixture of superiority and expectation, assuming compliance before any words were exchanged. Malik's presence, however, radiated a calm discipline that contrasted sharply with the officer's rigid posture, a quiet energy that drew the eye despite his deliberate stillness. As Rick approached, a subtle murmur ran through the audience, a wave of curiosity and unease that reflected the collective tension in the room. Malik did not flinch, his gaze locked on the judge's bench, acknowledging the formalities with a measured nod. The courtroom itself was steeped in neutral tones, the tall pillars lining the sides creating a rhythm of light and shadow, while the scent of polished wood mingled with the faint aroma of brewed coffee from the cafeteria down the hall. Outside the windows, the morning sun glinted off the city streets, but inside, the air felt dense, carrying the unspoken weight of expectation, authority, and judgment. Officer Thompson paused a few feet away, his hand instinctively brushing against his utility belt, an unspoken warning of the power he believed he held, and yet Malik's posture remained unwavering, his breathing even, his mind focused. Every flicker of the officer's eyes, every twitch of his fingers was noted and catalogued silently, the kind of observation that comes from years of rigorous training, a calm mind amidst potential chaos. The spectators shifted in their seats, some leaning forward unconsciously, drawn into the tension, sensing the silent standoff between two forces whose understanding of authority and restraint could not be more different. Malik's thoughts were quiet but deliberate, recalling the lessons instilled over years of discipline, the countless hours of preparation, and the unyielding focus required to maintain control in high-pressure situations. There was a patience in his gaze, a readiness that went beyond the ordinary, hinting at capabilities hidden beneath the composed exterior. As Rick straightened, squaring his shoulders, Malik's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in controlled awareness, measuring distance, timing, and the subtle rhythm of the room. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the occasional shuffle of papers or the soft clearing of a throat, each sound resonating in the charged atmosphere. Malik's mind remained centered, a calm anchor in the sea of unspoken expectations, while every observer, from jurors to bailiffs to onlookers, could feel the invisible tension, as if the room itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable shift that no one yet fully understood. Every element, from the light cascading through the windows to the polished wood beneath their feet, contributed to the slow, cinematic build of anticipation, setting the stage for a confrontation that was not measured in force but in presence, discipline, and an unshakable inner authority, each second stretching and pulsing, drawing the viewer deeper into the moment before the first move, the first word. The first reaction would change the course of what everyone assumed they knew about control, power, and respect within the walls of the courthouse. The courtroom remained hushed, every footstep and shuffle echoing through the tall space like a drumbeat measuring the slow passing of tension. Malik adjusted his posture slightly, his hands resting lightly on the folder, his fingers brushing against the corners as though each crease held a secret rhythm of preparation. The spectators shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, eyes fixed on the interaction unfolding between Officer Rick and Malik, sensing that something beneath the surface was quietly brewing. Light from the high windows fell across the rows of benches, illuminating dust motes that floated lazily in the still air, giving the impression of time itself stretching and pausing as if the room had suspended reality to focus entirely on the silent standoff. Officer Rick's steps, measured and deliberate, carried the weight of assumed authority, but there was an undercurrent of unease that he did not recognize, a subtle hesitation in the way his eyes flicked toward Malik, noting the composed demeanor, the unshakable calm that contrasted sharply with the officer's own rigidity. Malik's gaze remained steady, tracking movements without overt motion, registering the slight shift of a wristwatch here, a glance exchanged between two jurors there, every detail cataloged and stored in a mind trained to notice patterns, timing, and the unspoken rhythms of human behavior. The air felt charged, not with aggression, but with anticipation, a tension that seemed to pull the chest tighter, a slow awareness creeping over every observer that something significant was about to unfold. Outside, the hum of the city continued, cars passing, distant sirens, the ordinary noise of life that had no bearing on the extraordinary stillness inside the courthouse. Malik's breathing was calm, deliberate, each inhale measured, each exhale controlled, a subtle indication of his mental preparation, his inner discipline honed over years of demanding training and relentless focus. He observed Officer Rick's posture, the slight stiffness of his shoulders, the rigid set of his jaw, the minor shift of weight from one foot to the other, cues unnoticed by the untrained eye, but registered and understood by Malik in a way that allowed him to anticipate the flow of events before they occurred. The spectators' whispers were nearly inaudible, yet they added to the mosaic of awareness, a background hum against which Malik could measure reactions and assess the subtle influence of presence and perception. Every element of the courtroom, from the polished wooden floors to the muted tones of the walls, from the distant clatter of papers to the faint creak of benches, contributed to the slow, deliberate rhythm that Malik navigated with precision. The air itself seemed to bend around him, creating an invisible stage where the smallest gestures carried significance, where the calm control of one man could subtly influence the perception of every person present. Officer Rick adjusted his grip on his belt, a habitual movement meant to assert dominance, but Malik noted it as a signal, an unconscious revealing of intent, cataloged it silently, and allowed the moment to stretch just slightly longer, heightening the anticipation. Each second carried weight, a quiet crescendo building, as the audience, officers, and jurors alike became unintentional participants in the intricate dance of focus, awareness, and patience. Malik's mind remained alert but unshaken, tracking every variable, every subtle shift in the environment, maintaining an internal rhythm that allowed him to remain both invisible in his composure and dominant in his awareness. The light shifted slowly as the morning progressed, shadows moving across the floor, highlighting the contours of the room, casting subtle patterns that drew the eye in ways unnoticed but absorbed into Malik's understanding of the space. Every breath of air, every distant noise, and every glance from the crowd became part of a living map of observation, a silent anticipation that something would shift, and when it did, it would carry the quiet authority and disciplined presence of a man fully aware of both himself and the space around him. The tension was no longer just a feeling. It had become a tangible element of the room, a current that flowed around every observer, connecting the audience, the officer, and Malik in a shared yet unspoken expectation that the balance of awareness and control was about to be tested in ways beyond ordinary perception. Malik's eyes flicked subtly toward the far end of the courtroom, where the jury sat, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and subtle unease, unaware that every shift in their posture, every tilt of the head, was quietly observed and catalogued. The faint tapping of a pen against the wooden railing punctuated the silence, a rhythmic metronome that contrasted with the latent tension in the room. The polished floors reflected the morning sunlight streaming through the upper windows, creating soft patterns of light that danced across the benches and highlighted the careful movements of the bailiffs as they adjusted their positions. Each observer seemed suspended in a delicate balance, as if the room itself had become a canvas for the intricate choreography of awareness and control. Malik's presence was measured and deliberate, a steady counterpoint to the subtle nervous energy radiating from Officer Rick, whose jaw tightened slightly as he continued to watch Malik's composed posture, perhaps sensing the quiet authority that emanated without a word. The subtle creak of the wooden benches beneath the weight of spectators, the faint scratch of shoes against the floor, and the occasional rustle of paper created a layered soundscape that heightened the collective attention. Malik's hands rested lightly on his folder, the fingers brushing over the surface with a soft, controlled motion that belied the precision and discipline within, a silent testament to years of training that had taught him to observe, anticipate, and remain calm even in high-stakes situations. The officer's eyes narrowed, scanning the room, seeking a sign of hesitation, a crack in the composed exterior that might indicate an opportunity, yet Malik's demeanor offered none. Every slight adjustment in his posture, every blink, every inhale was part of an internal rhythm that coordinated with the external environment, aligning seamlessly with the quiet cadence of the courtroom. Light shifted slowly across the room, casting long shadows that stretched from the base of the columns to the far walls, creating subtle contrasts that added depth to the visual scene, enhancing the sense of suspense and anticipation. The spectators' whispers remained almost inaudible, yet they contributed to the ambient tension, a low hum that underscored the intricate dynamics unfolding between Malik and the officer. Each juror's gaze flickered briefly toward Malik, then quickly away, as if instinctively acknowledging a presence of disciplined calm without fully comprehending it. Officer Rick adjusted his stance, placing one hand on his belt, a habitual gesture of authority, while Malik remained still, his eyes sweeping methodically across the room, registering every detail, every micro-expression, every shift in weight or posture. The subtle movement of papers, the distant echo of footsteps in the hallway, even the soft hum of the air conditioning, all merged into a symphony of sensory input that Malik navigated with precision and grace, each element contributing to the layered texture of the courtroom moment. He inhaled slowly, a measured breath that flowed through his chest and settled into a calm center, his awareness extending outward like a quiet ripple touching every corner of the room. The room's atmosphere seemed to stretch and bend around him, every sound, every shift, every pause amplified by the shared attention of the occupants. Malik's gaze remained fixed, composed, yet attentive, a sentinel of presence that quietly held the energy of the room in equilibrium. The subtle tension continued to build, a silent crescendo that promised a turning point, the kind of moment where patience, awareness, and discipline would converge, allowing the events to unfold in a controlled and precise cadence, a testament to the quiet power of observation and measured presence in a space charged with expectation and unspoken anticipation. The atmosphere in the courtroom seemed to thrum with a quiet energy, a tension that was almost tangible, threading itself through the polished benches, the high ceilings, and the rows of spectators. Malik's posture remained impeccable, a calm center in the midst of a room that buzzed with anticipation, his hands resting lightly on the folder in his lap, fingers flexing just enough to release small, controlled movements that reflected his steady focus. Officer Rick's gaze darted occasionally to the judge, then back to Malik, each glance laced with a mixture of authority and unease, a subtle recognition of the composure that contrasted with his own tension. The sunlight filtering through the upper windows painted intricate patterns across the floor, the lines of light stretching and shifting as the day progressed, highlighting the quiet details in the room. The scuff of polished shoes, the subtle tilt of a head, the barely perceptible shift in weight as observers adjusted themselves on the benches. Malik's eyes moved methodically, scanning the courtroom with the precision of someone trained to notice micro-expressions and minor movements, absorbing the slight hesitation in the jurors, the soft shuffle of the bailiffs, and the whispered reactions of the spectators. Every sound, every movement, even the faint hum of the ventilation system, was catalogued in his awareness, each element contributing to the measured rhythm that he maintained internally, a silent orchestration of patience and readiness. Officer Rick shifted again, adjusting the cuffs of his uniform, a habitual gesture meant to assert control, yet in the context of Malik's calm observation, it subtly revealed more than it concealed, a minor fluctuation that did not go unnoticed. The spectator's attention wavered subtly between the two men, drawn by the unspoken dialogue of presence and restraint, the contrast between latent power and overt assertion creating a palpable sense of suspense. Malik's breath remained steady, even, each inhale and exhale carefully modulated, grounding him as the room seemed to stretch in slow motion, each second extended, charged with anticipation. The polished floorboards reflected the soft light, glinting along the edges of the benches and highlighting the small, deliberate movements of hands, the tilt of heads, the subtle interplay of glances between onlookers, all absorbed seamlessly into Malik's awareness. Officer Rick's expression tightened slightly, a brief furrow of the brow, a momentary glance that betrayed the discomfort he felt in the presence of a calm that he could not disrupt. Malik allowed the moment to extend, using the silence as a tool, letting the awareness of his measured composure settle over the room, affecting the perception of those present, tilting the balance of observation subtly in his favor. Outside, the city continued its normal rhythm, the low hum of traffic and distant voices a faint counterpoint to the concentrated stillness within the walls of the courthouse. Malik's focus remained unbroken, centered, attuned to every element, the folding of papers, the soft clearing of a throat, the minute adjustment of a chair leg, all woven into a pattern of observation that allowed him to remain undisturbed by the external pressures of expectation. Each spectator, from juror to visitor, seemed to absorb a fragment of this calm authority, their own movements unconsciously synchronized to the quiet rhythm Malik projected. The air in the courtroom seemed almost to thicken, dense with the unspoken understanding that something significant was poised to unfold, that the balance of perception, patience, and presence had reached a threshold where even the smallest gesture could carry enormous weight. Malik's eyes remained sharp, attentive, and unflinching, noting every detail without reaction, a disciplined observer whose silent command over the environment lent a quiet gravity to the moment, a subtle but undeniable assertion of presence that set the stage for what was quietly approaching, the convergence of awareness, preparation, and timing that promised to shift the atmosphere in a manner both measured and inevitable. Malik shifted slightly in his seat, his movements precise and unhurried, a silent indication of the calm confidence that radiated from him. His eyes swept across the courtroom, noting the subtle exchange of glances among the spectators, the slight tightening of jaws, the faint raising of eyebrows, all signs that the room was fully engaged in the unspoken tension unfolding before them. The sunlight continued to stream through the upper windows, casting narrow beams across the polished wood floor, highlighting the subtle details. In the room, the worn edges of benches, the intricate grain of the judge's desk, and the reflective surfaces of polished shoes as attendees shifted in their seats. Malik's awareness extended to every subtle sound, the gentle shuffle of papers, the soft creak of floorboards under the weight of movement, the faint hum of the ventilation system overhead, each contributing to the layered rhythm of the space. Officer Rick's stance remained rigid, his shoulders squared, hands resting lightly on his utility belt, an embodiment of authority that seemed challenged by the quiet command emanating from Malik. The jurors leaned forward imperceptibly, drawn into the tension, their attention held by the contrast between Malik's composed, deliberate stillness and the officer's taut, anticipatory posture. Malik's mind traced the contours of the room with methodical precision, registering every minute adjustment, every subtle flicker of reaction, cataloging each as part of a larger pattern that he navigated effortlessly. The polished floor reflected faint glimmers of light, creating soft, shifting highlights that moved in sync with the spectators, subtly accentuating the gravity of the moment. The air carried a quiet hum of anticipation, each breath from the audience, each slight movement, and the occasional cough weaving into the larger cadence that Malik remained attuned to without distraction. Officer Rick's gaze lingered on Malik for just a fraction longer than necessary, betraying a flicker of uncertainty, a recognition of the disciplined calm that contrasted sharply with his own outward tension. Malik's hands rested lightly on the folder in his lap, fingers occasionally brushing the surface in a controlled, deliberate manner that reflected both readiness and patience, a silent demonstration of his internal focus. The room seemed to contract and expand subtly around these two figures, the high ceilings and tall windows amplifying the quiet intensity of observation, as if the space itself were holding its breath in anticipation of the forthcoming shift in balance. Outside, distant city noises remained a muted background, the hum of traffic and faint chatter inconsequential against the charged quiet within the courtroom. Malik's breath remained measured, each inhale and exhale deliberate, a rhythm that anchored him firmly within the moment, while his eyes continued to assess and interpret every micro-movement and subtle cue from the people surrounding him. The spectators, officers, and jurors were drawn into an unspoken dialogue of presence and restraint, each aware on some level of the quiet authority Malik projected. Every gesture, from the slight nod of a juror to the soft shifting of a foot on a bench, fed into a network of perception that Malik navigated with seamless precision. The tension in the room continued to build, a slow, deliberate crescendo of anticipation, each passing second layering complexity onto the interactions, creating a charged environment where awareness, control, and subtlety converged. Malik's posture and gaze remained unwavering, a steadfast center in the growing momentum of the courtroom, each detail absorbed and interpreted with the quiet discipline of someone fully present, ready for the pivotal shift that was quietly approaching, a turning point defined not by abrupt action, but by the mastery of observation and measured anticipation. Malik's mind traced the contours of the situation with careful deliberation, each detail of the courtroom, the arrangement of benches, the placement of the jury, the slight tilt of the officer's stance, cataloged silently, forming a mental map that allowed him to anticipate the flow of every subtle interaction. His gaze moved steadily from one end of the room to the other, noting the minute expressions of those around him, the quiet adjustments in posture, the imperceptible shift of eyes toward him and then quickly away, all contributing to a growing awareness that the tension in the room was nearing a threshold. The polished floors reflected the soft, filtered light from the upper windows, creating elongated streaks that cut across the space in delicate patterns, highlighting the precision of each small movement, from the gentle brushing of papers to the careful arrangement of folders on the counsel table. Officer Rick adjusted his stance again, a slight shift of weight that carried with it an unconscious display of impatience, a minor crack in the rigid facade he maintained for authority, yet Malik remained undisturbed, his posture composed, his breathing even, every subtle motion a testament to inner discipline. The spectators were drawn into the rhythm of anticipation, a collective hush settling over the room as if the very air carried the weight of expectation. Malik's fingers traced faint, deliberate patterns along the edge of his folder, a small motion unnoticed by most but indicative of a mind finely attuned to timing, rhythm, and presence. Every creak of the benches, every whispered word between jurors, every soft shuffle of shoes on polished floors was absorbed into his awareness, each sound a component of the larger orchestration that he navigated with precision and calm. Light shifted gradually as the morning progressed, the sun casting soft reflections across the wood and illuminating the subtle textures of the walls and the high windows, creating a visual rhythm that mirrored the silent tension building in the room. Officer Rick's eyes flicked repeatedly toward Malik, a mix of curiosity and subtle apprehension, betraying an unconscious recognition of the controlled authority that Malik projected. The audience, from jurors to spectators, shifted slightly in their seats, their attention drawn into the quiet interplay of awareness and presence, each movement and glance contributing to a heightened sense of anticipation. Malik's breath remained deliberate, each inhale and exhale measured, a slow, grounding rhythm that anchored him amid the collective expectation. Every micro-movement, from the tilt of a head to the soft unfolding of a paper, was noted, cataloged, and mentally processed, the subtle interplay of observation and preparation creating a charged atmosphere that was as much about perception as it was about physical presence. Outside, the city continued its routine, distant traffic sounds and muted voices forming a soft backdrop, inconsequential compared to the concentrated focus inside the courtroom. Malik's composure remained unbroken, his posture and steady gaze commanding attention without overt assertion, a silent force that subtly shifted the balance of energy in the room. Each juror's careful glance, each officer's measured movement, and each spectator's quiet curiosity were components of a living tableau, all converging into a moment poised for change. Malik's awareness extended to every detail, every nuance, every subtle fluctuation in posture or expression, creating a network of perception that he managed effortlessly. The air seemed to carry a slow, deliberate charge, thick with unspoken understanding. As if the room itself held its breath in anticipation, every person in the space sensing, consciously or not, that the balance of attention, patience, and measured presence was approaching a pivotal point, a moment defined not by sudden action, but by the quiet mastery of observation, focus, and control. The room seemed to tighten around Malik. Each breath from the spectators, each subtle shift of a chair, adding to the invisible weight that pressed softly against the polished wood floors. The sunlight streaming through the high windows continued to illuminate the courthouse in a warm, diffuse glow, highlighting the subtle contours of the walls and casting long, shifting patterns across the benches. Where the audience sat, their expressions a blend of curiosity, tension, and restrained anticipation. Malik's posture remained perfectly aligned, a quiet statement of control and readiness, his hands lightly resting on the folder in his lap, fingertips brushing against the edges with deliberate calm. Officer Rick's stance mirrored authority, yet there was a noticeable tightness in his jaw and a slight stiffness in his shoulders, small indications that the composed presence of Malik was creating an internal shift, an unspoken realization that the balance of the room was not solely dictated by uniform or title. Every micro-movement, from the gentle adjustment of a juror's hands to the soft shuffle of shoes on the polished floor, became part of the layered rhythm that Malik tracked meticulously, a tapestry of observation and awareness that allowed him to remain fully present while the room collectively held its breath. The air itself seemed charged, a quiet hum of expectation threading through the high ceilings and tall windows, lending a sense of cinematic gravity to the moment, each observer caught in the unspoken dialogue between composure and anticipation. Malik's eyes swept over the room, noting each subtle expression, the fleeting glance exchanged between two spectators, the measured shifting of the bailiffs, cataloging every detail with the precision born of discipline and training. The polished wood reflected the light in soft, shifting patterns, catching on the folds of clothing and the angles of shoes, amplifying the visual depth of the room, while the faint sound of pages turning and pens tapping against legal pads added to the layered, quiet intensity. Officer Rick's gaze lingered on Malik, his eyes narrowing subtly, betraying the faintest uncertainty, a silent acknowledgement of the presence that demanded attention without a word, a calm authority that contrasted starkly with his own outward rigidity. Malik allowed the moment to extend, letting the silent tension settle fully across the room, observing how the subtle nuances of posture, gesture, and expression shaped the perception of those present. Each breath, each blink, each minor shift in balance from any observer became part of the complex map that Malik navigated seamlessly, a testament to focus, patience, and measured presence. The faint hum of the city outside served as an almost imperceptible counterpoint to the concentrated energy within, a reminder that beyond these walls life continued in ordinary rhythm, while within, the room existed in a suspended state of awareness and anticipation. Malik's breathing remained steady, each inhale and exhale a quiet anchor, aligning with the slow, deliberate pulse of the courtroom. Every subtle cue, from the light catching the polished floor to the slight rustle of papers, was absorbed into his awareness, creating a rich tapestry of perception and control, a moment suspended in time where observation, discipline, and quiet authority held sway. The room seemed to stretch and contract around this silent dialogue, each observer aware on some level of the charged presence Malik projected, a controlled force that subtly influenced every movement and glance, shaping the atmosphere in anticipation of the unfolding pivot, the convergence of awareness, timing, and measured influence that was quietly, inevitably approaching. A moment where preparation and composure would quietly dictate the unfolding of events and the perception of all who watched. Malik shifted his weight subtly, a controlled movement that maintained the balance of presence he had cultivated throughout the courtroom. His eyes scanned Officer Rick with a quiet intensity, noting the micro-expressions that betrayed a faint hesitation, a hint of uncertainty that had begun to ripple beneath the officer's confident exterior. The sunlight continued to filter through the tall windows, illuminating the courtroom in soft, shifting patterns, highlighting the polished wood of the benches and the subtle lines on the faces of jurors and spectators. Every shuffle of paper, every small movement of a pen, every muted cough from the audience became part of the intricate rhythm that Malik absorbed and navigated, each subtle sound and motion weaving into the broader tapestry of observation. The polished floor reflected the light in delicate streaks, creating an almost visual echo of the energy circulating through the room, as if the space itself responded to the silent dialogue between presence and awareness. Officer Rick adjusted his stance, the slight motion of shifting weight and straightening his shoulders indicating a growing awareness that the equilibrium he assumed he held was being quietly challenged. Malik's hands remained lightly on his folder, fingers brushing against its edges with deliberate calm, an outward expression of the inner discipline that allowed him to remain fully engaged while projecting an unshakable composure. The spectators were acutely aware of the tension, leaning slightly forward, following the subtle interplay of posture, expression, and attention between Malik and the officer, the energy in the room a shared current that threaded through every individual present. Malik's breathing remained measured, deliberate, each inhalation and exhalation grounding him, aligning with the slow, deliberate cadence of the unfolding moment, reinforcing his quiet command over perception. The faint hum of the ventilation system, the distant shuffle of feet along polished floors, and the soft rustle of paper all formed a symphony of ambient cues that Malik tracked effortlessly, each detail reinforcing his awareness of timing and presence. Light shifted gradually across the polished wood and the spectators' faces, creating a dynamic interplay of illumination and shadow that accentuated the quiet anticipation building in the room. Officer Rick's gaze continued to linger on Malik, subtle flickers of doubt and recalibration passing through his expression, a silent acknowledgement of the disciplined energy that Malik exuded, contrasting with his own taut readiness. Every juror, every bystander, every participant in the room was subtly engaged in the unfolding cadence, each movement and glance absorbed into the collective consciousness of anticipation and focus. Malik's awareness extended beyond the immediate, registering the slight tilt of a head, the soft exchange of glances between spectators, the delicate adjustments of posture that communicated more than words ever could. The tension in the courtroom thickened, not with overt action but through the quiet, cumulative power of attention, discipline, and presence, each second layered with the potential of the pivotal moment approaching. Malik maintained his focus, his presence a calm, yet commanding force that subtly influenced the energy of the room, drawing the collective attention into a poised equilibrium. The interplay of light, shadow, movement, and sound created a vivid tapestry of anticipation, the room itself a participant in the silent negotiation of awareness and control. As moments passed, the room seemed to pulse with expectation, each observer sensing the convergence of observation, timing, and disciplined calm that heralded a significant shift, a moment where the balance of perception and preparedness would quietly, inevitably, define the unfolding of events in the courtroom. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted imperceptibly, a subtle change in the rhythm of attention that carried through every corner of the polished wooden space. Malik's presence remained the steady center, his posture flawless, hands resting lightly on the folder in his lap, his gaze calm, yet penetrating, capturing the faintest indications of thought and reaction from everyone around him. The sunlight continued to stream through the high windows, highlighting the textures of the room, the grain of the polished wood, the soft folds of clothing, the gentle gleam of shoes reflecting the warm light. Officer Rick shifted slightly, an almost imperceptible movement betraying a flicker of awareness that the balance he assumed he held was quietly, irreversibly tilting. Each juror's subtle lean forward, each spectator's tentative glance, each adjustment by the bailiffs seemed to echo a collective acknowledgement of the change in energy, a recognition that the quiet authority Malik exuded could not be ignored. Malik's eyes moved systematically, taking in the micro-expressions of every person, registering a slight tightening of lips here, a brief narrowing of eyes there, each tiny detail feeding into a larger understanding of the room's collective perception. The hum of the ventilation system, the soft shuffle of paper, and the occasional scrape of a chair leg became part of an ambient rhythm that Malik integrated seamlessly into his awareness, reinforcing the deliberate tempo he maintained in both posture and presence. Light shifted gradually, casting long, angled streaks across the floor, dancing over the edges of benches and illuminating the faces of those in the audience with a soft, shifting glow, heightening the cinematic tension in the space. Malik allowed the silence to expand, filling the room with the quiet gravity of patience and preparedness, each second layering anticipation upon anticipation, drawing the observers deeper into the unfolding dynamic. Officer Rick's posture became subtly less assured, the slight tension in his shoulders and the careful placement of his hands hinting at the recognition of a presence that could not be easily measured or controlled. Malik's controlled breathing, measured and consistent, acted as an anchor not only for himself, but as an unconscious influence on the room, projecting a calm decisiveness that contrasted sharply with the taut anticipation surrounding him. Each spectator, from the jurors to the onlookers, seemed subtly aware of the shift, their movements slightly restrained, their attention focused and unbroken, caught in the quiet gravity of Malik's command of presence. The polished wood of the benches and floor reflected the filtered sunlight in ways that highlighted the stillness, the small gestures, the deliberate calm, and the accumulated weight of expectation. Every micro-movement, from the gentle folding of a paper to the subtle shift of a wrist, was part of the intricate tableau Malik navigated effortlessly, a living interplay of awareness and influence. The soft murmurs that might have arisen were suppressed by the collective attention, the room holding itself in quiet suspense, as if the very walls were attuned to the shift in balance. Malik's gaze swept once more across the room, taking in every nuance of body language, every fleeting glance, every slight adjustment, orchestrating a rhythm of observation and presence that had the subtle but undeniable effect of realigning the energy in the courtroom. The tension remained palpable, thick with anticipation, yet underscored by the silent authority Malik exuded, a calm force that quietly dominated the collective perception. The light continued to move across the surfaces, accentuating the polished details and casting a warm, deliberate glow over the observers, drawing their attention even more fully into the subtle but profound shift taking place. Every second stretched in measured intensity, every glance and gesture feeding the quiet crescendo that Malik held within himself, an unspoken orchestration of patience, awareness, and control, culminating in a moment where presence alone had reshaped the room, where observation and composed authority had quietly, yet irrevocably, shifted the balance, leaving the officer and every spectator aware of a power that transcended expectation, leaving the room poised on the edge of realization, the culmination of tension, and the promise of an inevitable reckoning defined not by action, but by the mastery of perception and measured calm.